Where do we go from here? 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 I want to know.
Okay. Welcome to the 34th Ask the Chief Forum. So, we're going to start out with exercises, and we'll get into it right after that. So, starting position, knees slightly bend, just a little reminder, and we're going to do, I say, 4 of these. Here we go. 1. And you should actually feel that energy almost immediately if you've been doing these regularly with me. Bringing that energy up and out. Pushing the density to the surface. 2. And 3. And 4. Okay, very good. Energy flowing today. Now, we get the bump. Hands approximately 12 inches apart. Start to feel that energy building up. Between your hands, you should feel it in the palms of the fingers. Anyone not feeling it, let me know. Okay, very good. So we're going to take that and contain ourselves. Contain your space. Contain the forum. And I'm going to take that and push it outward. Do a little further clearing of the space and the surroundings around your space. Starting 1. And 2. 3. And okay, but actually I didn't really increase that. So my apologies. I'm going to go back. And I'm going to increase, which means I'm going to give you the bump. Okay, here we go. Hands 12 inches apart. Okay. And since you all were feeling it ahead last time, so now I'm going to increase that energy. And anyone not feeling that increase in energy, let me know. So I'm increasing that. It might actually be more intense since we get the clearing of the space. All right. Okay. All right. I take it that everyone feels that increase. I'm going to take that, and we're just going to contain our space with it. Okay. So, continuing from where we left off last forum, we were talking about media, certain words that have certain meanings to them. And the last word that we didn't really get a chance to get into had to do with programming. And I think you had the definition for programming before I get into
Actually, that was covered on the
So that was covered on the
33rd
last one.
NSTHA.
Okay, so we want to see, in other words, the origins of programming, the word programming, just view the 33rd as the sheet.
I want to know.
So,
Not, I can look it up right now.
well, you can look as
Okay.
what I'm literally getting into,
Yes, Chief.
how programming is everywhere. So, one of the favorite, I say when you're born into this realm, and you forget that you had past expressions, and and then you just, like a little kid, a little baby or whatever. You get your first bit of programming from your environment. So you get your first programming from the parental units, mother and father, who's, literally feeding you, who's taking care of you, who you're interacting with every day, or basically every day. And you find yourself actually picking up certain habits from these individuals. The interesting thing about individuals who don't necessarily aren't very, very fond of their parental units. There are a lot of women who aren't fond of their mothers, and that tends to get exacerbated usually when they get into their teens. And the last thing they want to do is behave like this person, who they just see us as lame-o, problematic individual. I'm not going to be like her, whatever, because kids are very, very observant, and they'll observe all your little picadillos, being that I raise kids also. They're just, zeroed in, they're little spies and picking you apart at every chance, it seems like. So anyhow, what happens as the person becomes an adult, and I say usually before they get out of their 20s, sometimes, in their mid-20s, they will find themselves behaving similarly to individuals that they're not really crazy about. And sometimes they don't even see it. So they'll talk about how, what they don't like about the mother unit and the father unit and so on and so forth. And lo and behold, whoever's listening and they're observing this person, they observe that there's these characteristics. And that's part of programming. It's like programming literally through osmosis and through observation. So these individuals, you're looking at them to see how to deal in this world. You need some kind of blueprint, which is natural. So with that, then we come into other types of stimuli like entertainment. Let's say people who put their kids in front of a TV just so that the kids out of their hair, and then they turn on programming. So we did do a list of weird programmings for children, because all programming, all movies, all TV shows, as I've said before, but repetition is good. Music, all music has some kind of programming. And if that music comes from the system, the movies generally movies and things come from the system because not that many people have that kind of cash to create, their own like feature-length movies or whatever. Even though I guess that's changing a little bit with YouTube and all of that business. But again, programming comes from, we're talking about media. So there are a number of children's programs that individuals would think, aren't, how could that be dangerous? How can Sesame Street, be problematic? I actually had a client, when I told him about the programming and movies and things, he said, well, how could, was it Finding Nemo be a problem? To which I went down the line of, things having to do with family concepts, friend concepts, sacrifice concepts, or just accepting things without clarity, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
These types of things. Mm-hmm. So you're watching things that are telling you that this is the way to behave, but not giving you a really logical reason for why you should behave in this manner. And I remember as a kid, as part of experimentation, that you're watching these TV shows about wholesome families and so on and so forth, and how friendships and so on, all this kind of business. And maybe there's one problematic kid, but he's a bit of a scamp. He's not that harmful. But then you try to, in other words, emulate this out in the real world, and you find that none of this stuff flies. So, you're trying to be friendly or open to, new friends or whatever. And anyone who's been through school, which I'm sure you all have, school sucks, and a lot of people say that high school sucked the most. So anyway, we're talking about children's shows, and they actually have a list of children's shows online that were considered to be weird.
The weirdest ever. That's what
Yeah,
the title was. I didn't go through the whole list, but I just picked the ones that we were familiar with and were quite popular.
Mhm.
Should we go through that list? Or
Yeah,
I
you
did
can go
find
through that list with
Okay.
Congress. Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Did you-
We can muscle test on some since as to whether these particular ones are. Well, let's muscle test. This is going to be kind of like off the cuff. Like I do the movie reviews, let's talk about the intensity of damage vis-a-vis percentages. So, what percentage of these types of movies, whether it's 40% damage all the way up to 100% damage, or minimal damage, which would be 20%. So we'll start with the first one.
The first one, I guess Thomas the Tank Engine, because it's really quite.
Yeah, Thomas the Tank Engine is considered pretty benign. I watched it with my kids when they were, but it did have, it had programming. It has programming, I should say, because it's still, in existence. So it has programming, and some of that programming had to do with concepts of friendship and so on and so forth. I haven't seen it in decades, so I can't really just,
Faces were a little weird looking, like. Just
Well, trains with faces.
yeah, that's what the part that I was like.
Yeah, because again, it's like giving something that's considered to be a machine a human, like humanizing a train, humanizing an object. So as far as damage, I would say, and I'm going to blatantly say damage. These things are damaging, But if you have the wherewithal and you know what to look for, you can observe it and not be affected so much by it. But even observing it will slow something down having to do with your awareness of, in the real world, because all of these things are interconnected. It's not like Thomas the Tank Engine. This group decides this is what we're going to do to, our part to, subjugate the population, whatever. It's all connected to a broader web. But anyway, we're going to say that.
It's interesting that you say that though, in terms of like damage and all. I looked up the word programming just now, the definition, and it says in collinsdictionary.com, programming is the process of giving a set of instructions to a computer to make it able to perform a particular task.
Yeah, so in a sense, what this is saying from that definition is the process of turning people into robots, or consciousness into robots or androids. In other words, and I'm quite sure you've all have met individuals who are very robotic. And a lot of times these individuals, the more robotic they are, the less colorful they are, in the sense of their personalities. There are individuals who are just very monotone that you may talk to, and if you really check out their faces, a lot of times it almost seems like a little bit of a distant look in their face, or sometimes they're talking and it just seems that their expression in their eyes are blank, because it's like they're regurgitating information that has been downloaded into them. So, what do you want to have to say?
They have another definition where they talked about what is the difference between coding and programming. It says coding is a part of programming that deals with writing codes that a machine can understand. Programming is a process that creates programs that involve the ratification of code. So and codes require basic knowledge of programming skills without any software tools. But if the first part, coding is a part of programming that deals with writing codes that a machine can understand. And you were talking about in the Matrix how they have turned people into the virus on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And so it's like sometimes people may try to resist the program to be turned into a virus, but sometimes they have become completely the virus. And so they understand the coding that density puts out to them to enact a certain programs, a certain behavior, to accomplish a certain task.
Yeah, and at times coding, as I said, making the information, I don't know, it's like palatable in the sense to the subject. So, obviously not everybody's the same. There are individuals who are interested in certain things like, cars, or someone's interested in, I'm trying to think of just fashion or interior decorating or something like that. So all these individuals have their little box that they're in, that they identify themselves in. So there is coding that will be targeting these particular types of interests. But in the end, all of these different interests become one singular thing. In other words, creating a feeding platform for the density. So you can be interested in all kinds of things, whatever your gender is, whatever your race is, so on and so forth. You're all being equally programmed through something that's going to appeal to either you culturally, or your gender, or I guess culture. I'm going to say your, where you grow up, which is part of, we say, cultural experiences. So, I think this might be. Yeah, I think this might be a good time to actually do the rating of these particular children's shows. Then we can move on to how music, programs, and that there's generations who are programmed by certain lyrics and certain rap lyrics and music. So let's go and start with the Thomas the Tank Engine. And now that one, it seemed kind of fluffy to me in a sense, but I'm picking up like a 30% damage rate in Thomas the Tank Engine. So 30%, okay. I'm trying to interfere. 40%, no. 20%, no. 30%, yes. So I'm picking up, literally, that's the amount of damage in something like Thomas the Tank Engine, which is, considerably low, but still damage.
Lazy Town, it was a show for kids that had a guy, an adult man in the blue outfit, and a young girl in a pink wig or something, kind of plastic sort of. And they would have these very odd adventures.
Yeah, even with that, there are times, I never watched it, but I don't know, maybe I saw it in passing or something like that. Or maybe I saw when someone else was actually talking about the influences of shows, and this was one of the shows that they chose. And I believe that this person considered that they had some support for pedophilic behavior, the young girl and the grown man. And so, even as far as like them not being related to one another. So would we say that there's a muscle test for that? See if there's a something that is promoting pedophilia in shows like that. Also, there are those who've actually done studies on Disney TV shows, as well as some Disney cartoons where they slow down certain frames, where
Lion King.
the Lion King, but even just as far back as Snow White, or and some of these where there are frames that were and frames are going by really, really fast, but your subconscious is picking it up. So anyway, but Lazy Town, some reason they have a problem with me talking about this and removing them. They're pretty weak these days. So, as there is some promotion of pedophilia in Lazy Town, again, yes, this is the first time muscle testing on this. I didn't know what answer I was going to get. Damage rate for a show like that. They're really bothered. That's saying 70. 70% damage rate in the movie, in this, excuse me, a TV show like that. So if a kid's watching it, it's almost like it's okay, you know, if you're touched in an inappropriate way by an adult. These, oh, they're just walking now. Okay. Is that correct? Okay, yes. So in other words, it's like the system contradicts itself all the time. Now, when I say, when they were really, really just railing against violence in television and so on and so forth, but actually they were railing against sexuality in TV. This was like in the 70s, when I started paying attention to it in the early 70s, that, there's so much sex and, but then they were promoting all these very, very, very violent war movies and, in action movies and so on and so forth, where, people, guys just randomly just mowing people down, willy-nilly, but in the real world, if your kid was at war or something like that, and they got killed, then all of a sudden it goes back, how do you feel? Affected this person, his girlfriend at home, or his wife and his kids at home, how does that affect them? But in the movie, they're on the battlefield, blow them away. Who cares whether you had a mom or dad or a girlfriend or children? It's very contradictory stuff that goes on constantly in this realm. It's been going on for a very, very long time. In other words, don't war, but if your church says it's time to go to war, thou shalt not kill, or it's not good to kill people. Well, we're making some allowances because we don't like those people for whatever reason. But in reality, it had to do with the essence, But these are the kinds of confusing ruses that go on. So you wonder why you grow up and you're conflicted. You're not exactly sure how to behave. What's the right way to behave? So anyway, back to Lazy Town. It said 70% damage. That's pretty decent amount of damage. And I don't know if there's anything. Is there anything outside of the pedophilia that is promoting? So this concept of friendship as well, that you must have a friend. So as ladies say, this concept of friend, we talked about it being a loaded word anyway. They're promoting, you have to have a friend. Don't analyze them too closely, because if you analyze them too closely, you won't have a friend. So people will accept weird people into their sphere because at least he's a friend or she's a friend. This is correct. Yes. And this is programming. So that you don't think logically, you don't lose common sense. I've known guys, in the past where they're okay for the most part, but at times they get inappropriate in some of the shit that they say. And then I start to but, friend, he's okay most of the time, but, program told me, maybe it's a fluke. Instead of the fact I'm actually seeing deeper into this personality, I'm getting a glimpse of what they really are, but I've been convinced to ignore it. So over time, around long enough, and you know these individuals long enough, and you haven't fallen into just surrendering to, I have to have a friend, or I've known this person for this, many years and so on and so forth. Say, well, how can you throw away a relationship that, and, when it sucks, And as they get more used to you, it's like even in relationships, a guy will present himself or a woman will present herself in a certain way to whoever they're interested in, which is really interesting about, relationships, because they generally start out with lies anyhow. People trying to present themselves in a way that would be attractive to whoever they're focusing on. So why relationships tend not to work? Because they do start off, with lies. And after a while, people can't keep up the facade. So they're whatever their little glamour suit gets ripped, after a while. And then, well, I already caught this person, so I don't need to woo them anymore or whatever. They're in my trap. Oh, that shows I'm a reptilian. And I got him, I said, wow, you're a reptile, aren't you? And I said, yeah, so what? So all that to say that people will start to show their true colors after a while when they feel that they have you comfortably locked down. And I'm quite sure a lot of women have been out there looking for, the right guy and all this other kind of this, and then, well, he was good, but then he changed, and I've addressed that before in some forms. But as I repeat, if this person is no longer behaving nicely to you, they were never nice in the beginning.
Sometimes they don't even observe their own behavior, and they just think that person's being mean, but they.
Yeah, because again, the person who's observing, as Ms. A rightly said, is not that innocent either. Because perhaps they walked in with their lie, but maybe his density is more intense than your density, more clever than your density. You come in with this certain game of your own because you're convinced by programming that you gotta have a partner. And folks who really feel like I don't really want a partner, they have a hard time. Then they have this conflict. They say, well, I'm not really interested in a partner. I really like being a hermit. You don't have friends. You don't have a relationship. Or when I was, in my 20s, in my teens or whatever, if a woman at a certain age didn't have kids or a husband and kids, not just kids, because back then, having children out of wedlock was still considered really, really, bad, really, really bad. We get looked down upon, by society. But it kind of got, more relaxed as they went along. So it's not unusual for individuals to have children out of wedlock and so on and so forth. Not that it means anything, because I'm not going to judge them for whatever they're doing. But again, programming tells you that you need to have a relationship. You need to have, women need to have a husband, or even there's a lot of stories where, even in some of these fables, where the young male, he's busy doing whatever, enjoying himself or whatever, out there, and the father said, it's about time that you created an heir for the family. And he's like, well, I'm actually enjoying myself. I said, nah, if you don't, especially if it has to do with money, then they said, well, I'm going to cut you off unless you, get married and, and start producing heirs for the family. So again, the father's running a program, then he's putting this program on the son, who's like, yeah, I'm not paying that much attention to that program, saying I'm going to tune you up. This is a program, you better run this program or else. And mothers will do that. I have a cousin who never got married, had a couple of sister siblings, so they had a lot of sisters who didn't get married either. Fortunately for them, it wasn't that big of pressure coming from my family unit, my parental unit. But the other one, her folks were into the church and so on and so forth. So the mother unit would just, harass her after a certain point, straight into her 30s, about when you gonna give me grandchildren? But she has a career, and she's taking care of herself. And, I visited her and she has a nice, place and so on and so forth. And she seems just fine. But she's not following the program. So she gets harassed by one of the parental units. The father unit, however, had never bothered her, but the mother unit constantly pestered her. even though she had other children who had kids. But everybody's got to be on the program.
Gee, it was interesting when you were talking about coding and everything, and how people's minds have been roboticized, if that's a word. And I saw an image. Yeah, right. There's like an image of like, for example, what impressed on me was a mind, and it had these holes. They were like square, and the coding would come to it, and it would either accept or reject the coding. So you were saying that people are susceptible to certain types of coding, whatever their preference is. So they'll watch like My Little Pony, or they'll watch, or listen to whatever kind of music that they do. So they're accepting certain types of coding. And you said that, for example, sometimes they will override what seems like would be obvious to not do or do. For example, like if you were with someone and you knew them for a little while, but they started showing their true colors, and you're like, this person, I need to take a break from them. But the coding that they accepted already about friendship or family or girlfriends, boyfriends, having a relationship, suddenly that code activates that they've accepted, and they make a choice that is in total detriment to their life.
Yeah. And one of the things with density anyway in the matrix, it doesn't have 100% control over anyone. So that's why they're constantly tuning people up. That's why you find if you're watching media or whatever, they're repeating things over and over again. That's why if you go to a religious, church, temple, or whatever, there's repetition to keep you in that program, running that program, accepting that program. So as we're talking about the coding, and you were talking about these different holes, I actually saw them like each hole had a different shape.
Oh, cool.
It's like those little toolkits where they have all these little wrenches and these little, screwdrivers with these, 5 points, 4 points, Phillips screwdrivers, flatheads, and so on and so forth. So the coding is finding the right fit. So when they find the right fit for you, if you're into My Little Pony, they find the right fit for someone who's into My Little Pony. They find the fit for someone who's just an extreme sports head, or they find, something for someone who's into ballroom dancing and that's their thing or whatever. But how the matrix works, they say, we're going to get you, no matter how you hide, we're going to get you because you've been being programmed from the time you're a baby. But actually, if you really want to look at it in the real, you've been being programmed if you've had a number of lifetimes. So you've been programmed in those lifetimes. Then each lifetime, they add another bit of programming on. Then another bit of programming on. Or, for instance, I think I might have mentioned something having to do with family, a kid being interested in, having to do with oceanography. And there's this kid, born in the hood, but he's got a real strong interest in oceanography. To the point where his folks, thought he was weird, because that's not the program that they, run. So that happens with a lot of different families. You think, well, how did so-and-so end up being, so much different from the rest of the family? Because that coding or that program that was instilled in that past expression, and it gets even more involved in that because we got fragmentation, we got, attachments, we got, MCs and all of this, and it's just swirling around, and that's why it makes it very, very difficult for anyone to actually reach true enlightenment. Because there's so much to actually dig through to the point where you're not even sure which of those fragments really represent you as a supreme universe consciousness. So you're trying to find out, what does it really feel like to be connected to the real? You start to lose sight of that. So you'll choose one of these that may seem less harmful than the other. And I was going to say something about having to do with that. It had to do with a client. It's going to do with their interest, but we're going to move on and we're going to continue with the rating.
Okay. So also, Also, just as a little side note, I remember watching Lazy Town and they promoted the girl being saved by the adult man.
By the man.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, again, savior program, savior,
Yes.
yeah,
the find a man to save you.
yeah, or a guy falling into wanting to be the savior. You know, in other words, you're going to be, popular by being, by saving damsels in distress. And also with that mentality, you can get yourself in a whole lot of hot water because maybe one of those damsels that you're trying to save is a demon in a sense of the word demon, but someone who's very, very dense. And maybe her pretending to be helpless is her bait. So again, you can have this sense of I'm going to save the weak, primarily women and children or something like that, and don't underestimate the density in children because they're just miniature consciousness who more than likely have been through a number of expressions where you don't know what the hell they did in expressions unless you do a deep dive. So a guy can be programmed, and I don't know if I had a savior thing when I was younger, but I definitely had an empathy thing having to do with women because the programming from my mother unit, with her disappointment in her life and what her expectations were from the father unit and those things that he didn't meet. Therefore, I was supposed to pick up the mantle and do all those things that he wasn't doing for whatever the female was that I got myself involved in. Excuse me. So what happened through experience, you go out there, and after a while, common sense kicked in. And I said, I think that I'm being programmed to be a sap. Because density loves to send something dense towards something light. So they're going to mess with you. They're going to, to the point where you get not delusion, and well, I'm trying to find the right word, but there are other words where where you become suspicious of every. Yeah, well, that's not the word, but it's a paranoia, a suspicion, a fear. Literally, is what it is. It just ramps up a fear after a point. After you keep trying to perform this hero role, and you keep getting your hands like slapped, or even worse, person gloms onto you, and next thing you know, you've adopted a major problem in your life. Again, not to say that that person who's doing that is squeaky clean because he has his whatever their means for feeding. They're a passive feeder, so he may be a passive feeder. But the more intense individuals will always, and the denser individuals have always been able to feed more than the passive, feeder. Because the passive feeder has to work it to where the person will offer them, the essence of it. Look what I did for you. I worked so hard, and don't you feel bad about not contributing enough, and so on and so forth. Most incentives will find an excuse for not, contributing, and they'll continue to not contribute. So that's why I say it's like a passive. It's like a passive feeding that in most cases doesn't work because they'll always come up against somebody who feeds much harder than they do. It's almost if you run into someone who's on the same level of, if you have a bit more light or whatever, who have a bit more light themselves, something always veers you guys off, away from one another. And I think I've approached that a bit in one of the past forms also. But anyway, so we're going back to the rating and to the list.
Sesame Street.
Okay, Sesame Street. Interesting one. Yeah, I didn't want to answer that one. That one. First it said 85%. Then they corrected me. They said 95% damage from Sesame Street. Yeah, and probably when it started out, it may have been like maybe 85% or something like that. But once they realized that so many people were into Sesame Street, into the Muppets or whatever, they just piled on the program. It raised it to like 95%.
You say that they found a coding that worked with the masses.
I would say that again, with remote stress, and these guys are reacting. Excuse me. So it's actually yes to your question. I forgot exactly what.
They created, through that show, they created a coding that was accepted by the masses.
Yeah.
The masses opened up to that coding.
Yeah, and a lot of people thought the Muppets were cute. I thought they were funny, you know. But I've run into people who said Muppets creep the crap out of me. So you know, so it didn't connect with everybody. There's still individuals like, ooh, kind of repulsed by them, you know, or found Muppets creepy. It's like people who find clowns creepy. And to tell the truth, clowns are kind of creepy, you know. I have no fear of them, but it's just like, what the hell? You know, why with all the paint in the face and all of that to be funny, you know? When, you know, as a mature person, you know, if you want some humor, it's, I find it more fun to watch a witty comedian, you know, someone who has a really interesting way of looking at things and a funny way of looking at things. But the painted face and so on and so forth. And I recall, I don't know if it started in the 90s, and some of you might be aware of it, that there were these people in various areas, I don't know if it was just the United States, who would just dress up in a clown outfit and stand off in the distance and stare at someone's house. And that was another form of you know, getting essence. But I would say that the creation of clowns is probably dead anyway. Because there are kids that I know who have had nightmares having to do with clowns. And I think at one point they actually made a movie basically catering to that fear of clowns. And I forgot the name of the movie. I remember seeing it like ages ago, probably in the 80s or something like that. But again, you know, I'm not even sure about the programming of clowns. They definitely have been a tool for essence.
Teletubbies?
Teletubbies.
That was creepy.
I try to watch it. And I even sat with my daughter when she was little, and we tried to watch it, and she was like a toddler, and she couldn't, she couldn't handle it. She was like, "This is weird," literally, very, very weird. So I'm not sure exactly. I don't know if it's still on.
The son is a baby, right?
Yeah, the son, yeah, is a baby, face of a baby.
Let's see if it's still on.
If it's still being aired.
Yeah.
So if it's still being aired, it means that it's it's been pretty effective.
Yeah, I remember I remember watching just like one episode, and as soon as the sun came out, it got even weirder.
Yeah, well, it's weird to say that the characters are weird looking anyway.
Yes,
the Teletubbies are weird enough looking as it is. And yeah, like I say, when I first time I watched it, I said, yeah, I've seen pictures of these characters, but I want to see what they do. That's supposed to make them so interesting, you know. And then the sun came out. I said, whoa, something's wrong here. So
It's going to return on November 14th. It says it was revived from 2015 to 2018. It ran from 1997 to 2001. Then BBC revived it from 2015 to 2018. And then now they're going to start it up on Netflix on November the 14th, 2020.
So whatever they're getting out of it, essence they were getting out of it, they were getting quite a bit of essence out of it. I've never met anyone who liked Teletubbies. I mean, if any of you guys like Teletubbies, speak up.
I don't think they will.
Anyway, so I would say, if they're introducing it, in other words, it has to do with the amount of feeding, because it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I watched one show, and that's all I wanted to see. I didn't, this is, I'm going to say I didn't even want to see it in in the first place. And to tell you the truth, I didn't really want to see it, but I wanted to be aware of what kids were watching, kids my age were watching. And, for credit to them, they couldn't get into it. So we're going to see the rating on something like the Teletubbies. These guys are okay. And theirs have a 95% effective density, effective rate also. Harmful to awareness, harmful to the consciousness.
They're talking gibberish, Chief. So, I don't know what they're saying.
So sometimes if they're speaking in gibberish, they're speaking in code.
Oh, shit.
Okay. So what is that correct? That they're literally speaking in code. So they're hitting something, in the subconscious. So we got that Sesame Street and Teletubbies are both,
Yes.
neck and neck with a 95% damage rate.
Mr. Rogers.
Okay, yeah. I might have seen Mr. Rogers all 5 times, but that's because he's been around for a really long time. And even that one, my kids weren't so necessarily interested in that one either.
Song was weird.
Kind of haunting, actually.
It is haunting, yeah.
I love you. No, that's Barney.
That's
sorry.
Barney. Let's see how about Barney.
Okay, Barney's jumped in, so we're gonna hit Barney first, and then go back to Mr. Rogers. So, there are people who try to create their own Barneys because it's somebody in a freaking purple, dinosaur outfit, frumpy at that, and it's like all the rage. Traveling across country, and there'd be festivals, and there's Barney. So programming in Barney, and I think a lot of it had. He kept using the term "I love you." I think, right, something like that. A lot of love, whatever.
Oh yeah, I love you.
Yeah, right. So, yeah.
No, that's not. I don't know. African is Barney, so.
Okay. Well.
Oh yeah, it is. I love you.
Okay. So again, it's programming and everything. Programming Barney. Yeah. So Barney is not as far up as, and I don't know if it even exists anymore, but it got at its height, it was like a 65% damage rate. 70%, 50, 55, 60, 60%. 65, between 60 65% damage rate. Mr. Rogers.
All the pedophilic ones that are really getting.
Well, I didn't even say that to somebody. I got the pedophilic thing, like the weird neighbor down the street. It's okay to go into his house. It's Mr. Rogers. I'm gonna go. I'm over it. I mean, smoothie. Wow, even more than 95%. Okay, let's see if it's. Well, now they're like really almost like splitting hairs. I'm getting a 98% damage. And some kids may have gotten abused because of them putting this, be comfortable with the pedophile or the weird guy. Because he definitely was a weird guy. Even when I was a kid, he was a weird guy. And for some reason, to me, he almost dressed like one of these weird pastors. So there's a number of things that are going on in that even just crosses over into religion. Well,
It's really interesting that you say that. There was a movie that came out in, it's called, it was more recently, the movie was remade, but it was based on a book called The Little Prince. And they did a really pretty animation, but it was about a little girl who finds a weird guy down the street, an older gentleman, and she hangs out a lot with him because the mom is always busy working and stuff.
oh, that's that computer animated.
But that's definitely what came up when you were talking about.
Yeah, so what it does, it conflicts what parents will teach their kids. Say, don't talk to strangers. But then they confuse it. Okay, he's a neighbor. Mr. Rogers is, a neighbor. Look, he's on TV. They're promoting him. He's harmless. So again, and I remember that movie. And the character that she ends up, befriending more or less was a really weird guy. And in the movie, he may seem harmless, but if you were to actually meet someone who's like that in real life, they have a lot of sides to them, and I would guarantee you that some of those sides are very, very unpleasant, or even just very, very dangerous. So again, it's lulling kids into this sense of, oh, well, he's a neighbor, or Mr. Rogers he's parents don't mind Mr. Rogers, so let me watch Mr. Rogers, So again, that's another program that literally goes against what a parent says having to do with, don't talk to strangers.
My Little Pony?
Okay, My Little
It's
Pony.
very popular.
Yeah, which is very popular. There's, what is it, the grown guys, what do they call them?
Oh, bronies.
The bronies, or whatever, grown men who are into My Little Pony. Because the programming must be pretty intense, in My Little Pony. And it's like colorful, pretty harmful about some ponies. I never watched it. Did you have the Care Bears on that list?
Oh, no, I didn't, but
Anyway, we'll go back to My Little Pony. So not as intense as others, but bad enough. I'm getting a 75% damage rate. And you know more about it as far as
they had some odd characters. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to throw it over to you as far as, is it based on so-called adventure friends and...
Yeah, they're really heavy on the friendship. The power of friendship will save the day for every freaking
Yeah, they constantly throw that, that's why it's a loaded word, the word friendship, like, love is a loaded word, because it's almost like you should sacrifice just to have friends.
And even try to like anyone who is so-called the villain, it could be like Chaos. They have a character called Chaos, or they have like these other crazy characters who are like quite, they're shown as villainous, or they do all kinds of weird stuff, but you're supposed to save them with the power of friendship, because that's what you do.
Well, that's some of the programming in a number of even like TV shows for kids, but even supposedly for adults. If you watch any of these, I don't know if The Flash is DC or Marvel, I forget. And if you watch any of those type of TV shows, The Flash is always willing to well, not say willing, but the nemesis or the bad guy is running around killing people. And he runs up against the bad guy, but he thinks that he can convince the bad guy just to turn himself in, so he doesn't have to kill the guy. And I think maybe some of the attitudes of some of the shows have been changing a bit, but again, they have their own, their own programming in it, where logic, in other words, define common sense. So if I'm up against someone, so that's my role as this superhero guy or whatever, and I'm up against some guy who's just like slaughtering people left and right. My mind would say before I even meet this guy, I'm going to have to kill him. But they always have, in most cases, the star as of those shows. For him to be good, he always has to say, "I will bring you to justice, and and you're going to go to jail, and so on and so forth, and you're going to pay." And and a lot of times the guy will I'm going to give you a chance to redeem yourself. And what do? The bad guy will literally try to kill him again. Or go off and kill someone else and so on. So these are like illogical programming that overrides, I would say, mother wit or common sense. Now, did I rate that one? Not the Flash, but the last one. Oh, 75%. Yeah, yes. 75% damage rate in My Little Pony. But when we start talking about My Little Pony, there is the Care Bear. And there's a number of them coming up all of a sudden. When we were going over this a couple hours ago, I was kind of stalled there because there's also the Smurfs.
Oh,
So, but let's go with Care Bears first.
Okay.
So we hadn't really, done any of it. We hadn't really looked at Care Bears until now. So as far as like the damage rate for Care Bears, doesn't seem to be as extremely high as the other ones. I get more like a 45. So 45% damage rate on Care Bears, and maybe that's why it's not on the top of our minds, to think about it. The ones that are the most on the top of your mind the most tend to be the ones that do the most damage. Because they get promoted, because the Matrix always promotes the things that are going to, excuse me, feed the most essence to the density, to the Matrix. Yes.
I don't know why, but this is coming up, but you wanted to do one more?
No, we can go with it.
Oh, go with it. Okay.
Mhm.
So it made me think of the story that you were listening to on a podcast about these women who would try to climb down these guys' chimneys to like the guy was like, no, I don't want to date you anymore. But she's like, I ain't taking no for an answer. So she's just climbing down the chimney. And one of them dies and one of them doesn't. But you would think, like, what possesses someone to freaking climb down a chimney and freaking get stuck and die? And you were saying about the coding being activated about, like, I need this guy no matter what. And then the children's story of Santa Claus
Climbing down the chimney.
Ugh!
So again, guaranteed, everything that is presented to you in this realm is damaging. They said, well, what the hell do I do? This is why those of you who are clients, I'm delving into those pieces, so that you can see more clearly, what's interfering with your flow. What is causing you to do certain things that are disadvantage, leave you at a disadvantage or very damaging to yourself. And some are so steep in the programming that you can just show them a chart, and point out, but by that time they're blinded by the program and they won't accept it. Okay. Well, the damage rate. Okay. Since the hour's already up. So the story having to do with Santa Claus, I would say that one has like 100%, because they push that like ever since I was a little kid, and before I was even came in to this particular realm, this particular time, they were already pushing Santa Claus, pushing. The jolly old guy who squeezes his fat ass down your narrow chimney and gives you toys.
And has little kids sit on his lap.
Right. Well, yeah. Again, that kind of rolls over to some religious stuff also. With the children sitting on the lap and so on and so forth. So, and the last one that I will do will be the Smurfs.
They have pedophilia in that too.
Yeah, and I never liked the Smurfs. So, but they were pushing it so much that it was hard for me to not catch a little bit of Smurf. When you're watching TV or when your kids are watching television, or even when you have friends who are watching TV and so on and so forth. Scooby-Doo is another one that's really, really damaging as well. And it's because my sensitivity, I never liked Scooby-Doo. It wasn't about I was scared of, the cheap-looking ghosts. I liked, I didn't mind, horror films because I grew up in that. They had, Wolfman and Dracula and and Frankenstein and all that. I watched that stuff. But when it came to Scooby-Doo, I said, oh, this is low-rate animation, man. But a lot of people glommed on to Scooby-Doo. Damage to Scooby-Doo, 85%. Easy. Smurfs? Did I say Smurfs 75? I'm getting 75. So the damage rate was Smurfs, 75%. But anyway,
Well, I looked up just right now, and it says, I just looked up Smurfs and pedophilia. It says England's greatest pedophile introduces the Smurf song, or Smurf toy collection exposed as sick child rapist.
whoa.
UK man dubbed Papa Smurf gets 16 years for child rape. Does anyone think Smurf sexually abused boys when they were, in an episode? So there's a lot of that. So all I have to do was say Smurfs and pedophilia, and it brought up all this stuff.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of pedophilia in the realm. And I've talked a bit about that having to do with energy levels and so on and so forth for prepubescent children. But anyway, our time is out. And so we're going to, sign off here. And we will, I'll see if we have enough to continue with another Ask the Chief. Could be Ask the Chief having to do with Ask the Chief movies, something like that.
Yeah.
I might address it in the Ask the Chief movie, and may address like even some of the anime that are very interesting that's come out in the last, as I say, last 5 years.
Because some of these kid shows became movies. They have Smurf the movie. When I watched that,
Yeah.
I left the theater.
Oh, you
I was like, I can't deal, because there was nothing else to watch, and someone was like, just come on, and I was like, okay. We sat through like half of it, and we just.
Yeah, well, I saw part of it on. Well, it was a Blu-ray or something like that. I didn't go to the movies to see stuff like that. But anyway,
Tell me if you
okay,
can.
everyone. Thank you again for joining Ask the Chief, and
Really goes.
we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Where do we go from
Bye-bye.
here? Who really knows? Who
There you
really
go.
knows?
This is it. Let me give you one piece of advice. Be honest. He knows more than you can imagine.
I want to know. I want to know that I'm living in another's dream, and would really like to change the scene. I want to know. I want to know.